Now, this AU starts off with Georgie squatting in front of the storm drain, which is probably one of the most iconic scenes in the It movies.
Hiya, Georgie.
And just like in the original movie, Georgie loses Bill's paper boat down this drain, but in this version, Georgie has a walkie-talkie, and when Bill tells him that it's time to go home, he listens. And when Pennywise tries to get him to grab his boat so he can take a bite out of him, Georgie just tells him to keep it so that he won't have to be alone in the sewers. And while we can tell that Pennywise isn't happy about losing a meal, he is also interested in this gift that Georgie gave him, almost as if he's never experienced this type of kindness before. The next scene takes place sometime later, and we see Georgie come home covered in dirt. And we learn that Bowers and his gang threw his bike in the river, and apparently Georgie got all dirty basically trying to get it back. And in this panel, we get to see Bill promise to go with him to get the bike out, giving us a glimpse into how good of a big brother Bill actually was, considering that we, didn't get to see much of their relationship because, But it turns out that they won't actually need to go look for the bike, because when Georgie goes into his room, we see that his bike is actually there with a red balloon attached to it. And usually when we see a balloon in the novels or in the movies, it's after Pennywise does something evil or just super creepy. So while he may have thought that this is going to scare Georgie, in actuality, it just looks more like he's giving him a gift, funny enough. The next day, we see Bill and Georgie out for a ride when Georgie goes to the storm drain, thanks Pennywise for bringing him back his bike, and then leaves him some popcorn and cocoa packs because it probably gets cold in the sewer. And while Bill doesn't believe that Pennywise is real, we see his hand come out and grab the snacks once they are gone. And later that night, while Georgie is sleeping, we hear some slurping and see Pennywise sitting on this chair, sipping cocoa, apparently breaking into the house so that he could use the kettle. And based on the fact that Georgie isn't freaking out at all, we know that he truly doesn't see Penny as a threat or a monster. And I think he starts to like the clown even more because he even makes a cup for him as well. And this next scene is interesting because you can tell that Penny is confused here, trying to decide if he should eat this kid or let him live. But before he can come to a decision, Bill opens the bedroom door and he disappears, leaving Georgie to try and convince his brother that Pennywise is not just an imaginary friend. In the next scene, we arrive at the well house, and most of the Losers Club is here doing some kind of scavenger hunt looking for dolls. But Georgie gets distracted when he hears some singing, and he heads down to the basement thinking that it's Penny. Here he sees a well, and he leans over and takes a picture, thinking that he's surprising Pennywise. And when his brother calls his name, we see that he leans his weight onto this well, and then he starts to fall in because the well is old and it starts to crumble under his weight. But before the worst can happen, we see Penny place a hand on his chest and push him out of the well, actually saving his life. And this time, all the boys see it. So they can't deny anymore that Pennywise is definitely real. And I find it kind of funny that Richie is the only kid that has the proper level of panic here. The last thing that I want to note in this chapter is that Georgie did manage to snap a picture of what was inside of the well, and we see that it looks like Pennywise mixed with a centipede kind of winding its body down this well. And we can see that Pennywise looks very creepy down here, which is why Bill doesn't let his little brother actually see the picture. And while Georgie is trying his hardest to get them to understand that Pennywise is not a monster, Richie delivers the best line when he says, "Right. 7 foot tall, razor tooth, physics defying clown. Seems like a friendly guy to me." And being upset by this, we see Georgie leave, heading to the Barrens, sick of his brother and the other boys questioning him about Penny. And in the window here, we can see Pennywise watching him as he goes. The next chapter starts with Georgie sitting at the river, still stewing over the boys calling Penny a monster, and then a gunshot cuts through the silence. And of course, it's Bowers and his two goons, and since they are rotten kids, they decide that since Georgie was able to get his bike back, this time they're going to throw him into the river. And I love the fact that Georgie is brave enough to stand his ground here, even though he's only like 7 years old. But before the boys can actually hurt him, we see Penny start to rise up from the water, and then we see that Pennywise is definitely still a monster, as he smiles and then shapeshifts into this absolute monstrosity. And while the other two boys escape, Bowers is caught by these black hands coming out of Pennywise's throat. And we see Bowers begging to be let go, saying that he'll never mess with Georgie again. But based on the look in Pennywise's eyes here, I don't think that he's going to have mercy on this kid. The only thing that ends up saving Bowers is the fact that he gets a shot off and is able to run away. Now, for a moment, it looks like Georgie might freak out, but instead, he's overjoyed, thinking that Pennywise is awesome, and being more surprised at his abilities than afraid. And I think that this confuses Pennywise more than anything, because he cannot understand why this kid isn't scared. He's having a hard time understanding that Georgie truly sees him as a good friend. But when you really stop to think about it, it kind of makes sense. As the kid says here, Penny brought his bike back and Georgie gave him popcorn in return. Penny literally saved his life twice and made the kid hot cocoa. So while Georgie does understand at this point that Pennywise is a monster, he thinks that he's a good monster, kind of like a James and Boo situation, if you guys remember the Monsters, Inc. movie. And hearing this basically short circuits Pennywise's brain, and he begins this creepy laugh. And I have to let you guys hear this because the voice actor did a fantastic job with this.
Good monster. Good monster.
Now, while Pennywise is laughing, Georgie can see that he has a wound from where Bowers shot him. And wanting to help, he goes and pulls out some Batman Band-Aids, which is not only freaking adorable, but again, I think this is the creator's way of showing us just how innocent and naive Georgie is, which really explains why he can be friends with this literal world-eating monster. But by the time that Georgie turns around, Pennywise has already returned to his lair, and while down there, he starts to contort his body and lash out, even throwing this plank through this mirror here. And the only thing that seems to calm him down is looking at the boat that Georgie gave him earlier. In the next chapter, we see Beverly, and she's on the phone with the boys talking about Pennywise. And she makes an important point when she says that once Georgie met this monster, all the kids stopped having weird visions and hearing creepy sounds. And most importantly, no kids have gone missing during this time as well. And she believes that maybe Georgie becoming friends with this monster has made it not want to harm the youngsters anymore. And I'm pretty sure Pennywise can hear them right now because he starts to growl and you can hear her come up through the sink. But before Beverly can comment on it, she's interrupted by her father, and this guy is the worst kind of man. And for my people who can't get the context of that clip, let's just say that he's abusive. This chapter ends with Penny hearing Georgie's voice and seeing images of him and all the nice things that he's done for him up to this point. And it took me a moment to realize that Matron, or aka his brother, is basically showing him these images. And while at first Pennywise believes that his brother is laughing because he hasn't been able to feed in a while, I think that the turtle is actually just happy that Penny isn't harming any innocent people at the moment. And I think that this gives Pennywise an idea, and he says that he will look at this issue from a different angle, meaning that he may be looking for a different group of people to feed on. And in the next chapter, we get our first look at who his new victims may be, starting with Sonia, who is Eddie's mother. She was the mom who always said that her son was sick when in reality he was fine. And this is why when she's putting his pills in this container, Penny makes her see the word liar written in blood. But before she can actually turn around and see Penny in the shower, he disappears. Next, we see Al Marsh, who is Beverly's father, and he's looking at his belt because he's thinking about taking out some anger on his daughter. But as he's looking at it, Penny appears behind him, calling his name and drooling all over his shoulder. But again, he disappears before Al can actually see him. After that, we get Bowers and his gang, and they're getting ready to actually hit this mailbox, and we can see Pennywise is inside of it. But before they can actually swing, we see Butch Bowers pull up, questioning his son about why the safety of his gun was off when he grabbed it for work that morning. And while it's clear that this father is also a piece of crap, it doesn't look like he's willing to harm his son out in public. So he hops back in his car, but as he's driving, we see those little claws coming out of his car's vent, and Butch, being surprised, almost crashed the car. And not to sound callous, but I really have no problem with Pennywise hunting down these people because they are some of the worst characters in Derry, honestly. Now, the next chapter, we see Beverly again, and she's about to leave her house when her father stops her and shows her the picture that Georgie took earlier in the comic. And her dad is freaking out because he's been seeing things due to Pennywise, but he believes that his daughter may have something to do with it. But before he can actually hurt her, he can hear singing coming from the TV. And I love this panel here when he falls to his knees and seems to be wrapped up by the lyrics. And they read, "So mad at life that he scared off his wife, takes it out on his child with any breath. But now all you'll get is a slow, drawn out." But before we can actually hear the end of the song, Beverly runs out of the house. But we all know that the last word is definitely death. Pennywise is obviously trying to instill as much fear into Al as he can before he devours him. And as funny as it sounds, he's basically like seasoning his steak before he eats it. Now, after fleeing from her home, Beverly runs to Bill's house, but he isn't there. Luckily, Georgie is home and he lets her in. And while they are speaking, all these pictures of Pennywise on George's wall really stand out. And while Beverly has a hard time understanding why Georgie isn't afraid of him, he makes a great point here. He says that her father doesn't look dangerous, but he's actually a really bad man. So basically what he's saying is, you can't judge a book by its cover. After that, we see Georgie ask Beverly if she's going to stay over for the night, and while it seems like she's going to actually reject the offer, she's so tired that she passes out mid-sentence. Her last words being that she doesn't even have a toothbrush. And being the good kid that he is, Georgie decides to go grab one for her. And I thought that maybe the family had a extra one in the house, but we see that he actually gets on his bike and heads over to the store to buy her one. But due to the heavy rain tonight, we see him lose control of the bike and crash. And judging by the red in the water here, he seems to be injured pretty badly. And in the last panel of the chapter, we see Pennywise's hand come out of the storm drain and pull him in. The next chapter starts with the Loser Club out looking for Georgie, and while they are aware that this could be a trap by Pennywise, they also know that none of the adults in town will help them, so they decide to follow the blood splatter into the sewer. And not wanting to waste any time, we see that Bill heads in first with his friends following slowly but surely. Next, we cut over to Georgie, and we see him sleeping on this mattress with a Batman band-aid on his head and a clown doll in his arms. And then we see that his brother and the gang have found him. And while Bill is checking him over and asking what happened, we see Penny standing on the side of this wall, waving down at the kids, letting them know that he's the reason that Georgie didn't bleed out. And I think this is a point that really solidifies that he truly has changed from his usual bloodthirsty self. After that, we see him float down from the ceiling, which is another iconic Pennywise move. And when Bill asks him what he is, he simply responds by saying that he's Georgie's friend. And then we see Georgie walk up to Penny and give him back his little clown doll, while also telling him that he looked much better than he did in the Barrens. And right when it looks like the kids may be getting out of here, we see Penny tell them that the show is just about to start. And then we see somebody calling out to Beverly. And of course, it is her father that walks through the sewer pipe, belt in hand. And he immediately started accusing the children of putting things into the water to make him hallucinate. And he slowly starts to make his way to them, saying, "You boys got no respect, playing down here in the scum and running around with my little girl doing God knows what, messing with my head." And since he truly believes that these kids are behind all this weird stuff, he has no problem with treating them the same way that he treats his daughter. But before he can actually get close enough to swing, we see teeth appear on the ground, crunching down on his leg and forcing him to fall face first into the rest of the teeth. And for a moment, it looks like Bev may pick up his belt to defend herself and her friends. And while the father seems kind of confused as to why she's reaching for it, as if he never expected her to fight back, he actually starts to laugh when he sees her pull away from the belt, thinking that she's just too weak or scared to actually go against him. But what he didn't see was Pennywise behind him, his maw large and gaping, ready to consume him whole. This man was so busy being hateful to his own kid that he didn't even notice Penny until one of those arms grabbed his foot and started to drag him into the jaws, leaving nothing behind except a bit of gore. And I just want to say, you know that you're a terrible parent when your kid doesn't feel even a little bit bad after watching you get eaten. Now, the next chapter kind of surprised me because we see that Al is now in Pennywise's world, and he's basically getting tortured. Pennywise seems to want to up his fear level even more before he finally puts him out of his misery. And with that fact, we see Penny take this form of a centipede again and wraps around Al's body. And then we see this text that says, "All that anger, all that violence, you may look grown up, but you never stop being that scared little boy, trying to make yourself feel safe, trying desperately to be in control by making others afraid." And then we see him fall into this orange whirlpool, which is then sealed with a dairy sewer manhole lid, which I think is supposed to symbolize that he's actually being devoured now. In the final chapters, we see Georgie sitting on the porch of the well house, and we see that he wanted to bring Pennywise some popcorn as a way to say thank you for saving him again, and Pennywise wastes no time in eating it. In a wrap-up, we see Georgie ask Penny if he ate Bevy's father, which he definitely did, but Penny also asked that he was going to eat Georgie when they first met as well. And while I think that he may feel that Georgie would actually be scared at this point, Georgie still doesn't give a dang, still having absolutely no fear of this clown. But we do learn why Pennywise actually spared his life to begin with. It wasn't because he's kind or that Georgie didn't have enough fear of him, but because Georgie gave him a gift, aka the boat. And it's kind of like a monster rule that a gift has to be repaid. And it seems like since Georgie is so young and naive, he actually saved his own life, continuing to give gifts to Pennywise, like popcorn and hot cocoa. So basically, Penny wasn't able to actually eat him because he was continuously being in his debt. And also, I think that with that time that George bought himself, Pennywise actually started to like him. And we kind of see proof of this in the next panel when Georgie gives him a hug, thanking him for deciding to be a good guy. And while Pennywise doesn't fight back against the hug, he does try to explain to Georgie that he is beyond human morality. He's the eater of worlds, just pure destruction. But Georgie just takes that as meaning that he's the destroyer of evil people and things, which of course makes Pennywise a good guy in his eyes. After that, we see Georgie get a call from his brother on the walkie-talkie, which, just to point out, the walkie-talkie is the goat of this AU. It changed the whole course of the story. But with that call, he knows that he needs to go home for dinner. So we see him say goodbye, and he runs off, careless as ever. In the final panels, we see the turtle reach out to Pennywise, saying, "Well done, brother." And while Penny tells him to shut up, the turtle just laughs, happy to see his brother doing some good in the world for one.